Escaping Dystopia. My name is Wall. I'll be your host for today. This is episode 120. On July 14th, 2022. Today we're going to be talking abortion and insurrection. Again, nice, light, happy topics as we discuss the day's news. So let's make sure, quick tech check for us. Make sure we're working here. Oh no! Oh yeah. You know, it is remarkable how annoying so much of this stuff can be. But it's been a few weeks, been about a month or so since we've been on. Having a good time here with y'all today. Oh yeah, we need to also share the fact that we're doing this. I'm so bad at this. And there I am just standing, staring at the side. Oh no. Yeah. Dead air. That's why you need producers. Alright. Good stuff. Little profile for you. Alright, so we got the stream going up and going. We are good to go. Let's bring that here and share it a few places. Then we'll get started proper on the show today. No worries. There we go. See comments. That's the last one. Come on, man. There we go. That's the one. All right. We do have somebody watching. All right. Well, my apologies. Oh, wait. That's me. Okay. So, let's get this. Let's share this a couple places. Hopefully we're logged in. We'll see if anybody wants to walk by. Do that. We'll change to that. Go here. Not now. Gotcha. Doing a show right now. Boop. Post that. Gotta, pull together my few hundred followers from here and there and everywhere, and maybe we'll get an audience at some point. And I'll actually maybe even try and be aware of it somehow instead of just this new technology, which again I should be wildly more familiar with since I've been here the whole time it's existed. But anywho, doing a show right now. Alright, that'll work. We'll do that. See if anybody wants to wander over. Alright, let's get rid of that. And these we will use later. And I'm just so on top of it. We'll hide that. And we'll hide that. Alright. Welcome once again to Escaping Dystopia. So, many people may not know this, right? Since I don't really talk about it much, but one of the reasons I started this show was because I saw the trajectory this country was going after 20 years of kind of lackadaisical silliness, and thought it was going to be kind of bad and dark. So, over the last couple weeks, we've seen this come to fruition in one of the most scary, directly, just dystopian ways possible. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more today. The light might be a little bright. I don't know. Anyway, I need to get some new lighting stuff for my thing. But essentially what's happened over the last few weeks is the Supreme Court has completely struck down the decision on Roe versus Wade in the United States. This was a decision that was forecast. We saw that it was going to happen with the leak that came out a few months ago. There has been since then just so much weirdness and difficulty around this issue, and it's hard for me to really kind of cover some of this in full detail, so we're just going to kind of go through it a little bit when we go on this issue. Spaceship Earth this week, we put a new telescope out beyond the atmosphere. It's a super powerful one. It's letting us see further and deeper back into space than human beings have ever seen before, and should have ultimately reveal some amazing stuff to us about the texture and makeup of the universe. Really awesome, very cool, big stuff. In the context of this other thing, it's becomes a little bit more interesting, as well as our next major story, which is the January 6th hearings. So I did this show a lot more consistently for the first few years of the Donald dump, that number of years where we had this fascist moron running our country, executing the laws of our country, so to speak. After his electoral defeat was clear and obvious, and he lost lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit trying to challenge the election, became clear, of course, that A, he was never going to concede, and that also that was bad. And so what we see now is the investigation into what he did over that time period, leading to those horrible scenes on the Capitol steps, with all just the craziness and the, I need to cue this stuff up better. The insurrection. It was so hard to watch, right? As any kind of American, just the pit in your stomach, pain from that day, and watching those things. So that's been being covered again in depth and detail by the investigation. We'll talk about that a little bit later, and then a little bit more about our space telescope and our nature of existence on this cute little rock we got. I do have the AC on here because, as with most of the country, it's super hot here. So I'm doing this near the end of the day, live time, which means it's hot outside. We got a little rain this afternoon, but like most of the country, it's getting hotter and hotter and hotter. So we have a new space telescope that we can see far deep into the future, while our same science here on Earth is telling us that we're baking ourselves. Let me do that real quick. I'll just toss that up here. This is some of the stuff on that. This is one of the first deep field shots they got. Just kind of testing out the cameras. Again, the focus. This is what's wild about this one, right? Is that is essentially like if you were to hold up a grain of sand and hold it like that in front of the night sky, what you're looking at right there would be behind it. And these are entire galaxies. Each one of these little things. It's just incredible, and to think about the amount of universe that's out there. The notion that we're alone in this universe, of course, I think biologically seems as, to me, absurd as the notion that we're alone biologically on this planet, which we are clearly not. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit at the end of the show, because I do want to come back and touch this, because it is amazing and wonderful to see, right, and to have this awesome stuff out there. And it gives a great perspective on our human experience. We're going to talk here a little bit about some of the not darker, but more complex and difficult aspects of humanity in this show tonight. And I hope you'll stick around. This is not like the easiest stuff to talk about, but as has been very clear over the last couple weeks, there's a great deal of education that needs to happen for this country around this issue of abortion and what even the word means. I'm going to show you some clips here in a second. that are just mind-blowing, especially to me, but then to understand that the people that are making these arguments are in fact people who have power in this country. So the whole idea of escaping dystopia is to avoid having a society that's this dystopian hellhole that we then have to break out of, right? It's so much easier. Excuse me. Had a bit of the BA5 running around the house lately, so I haven't had a fully positive test in a while, but anyway, there's another COVID going around, just to keep that in context of this year and this pandemic, even though I don't make it a focus of my show a great deal anymore, largely because the infections are not resulting in direct deaths. We'll see what the long-term effects are. Anyway, our issue around even the terms of this abortion debate and what the reality looks like now are just completely, to me, like just almost mind-blowing, like how far apart we are, and even using the right words. Ooh, I need to make sure and bring this up. So I ran into this and the guy who wrote it a little while back. It is a wonderful... Oh, I was so close to hitting the right bookmark. My apologies. I need to get my whole process for doing the show again better now that I've got my streaming stuff working too. This, I will share this and I'll put this link in the show as well. Let me go back here. So this is a book-length PDF put together by these folks here. Some philosophers working. Basically, this is their argument for why most abortions aren't wrong and why all abortion should be legal. It's a really wonderful work because it breaks down the terms of the argument that are important to understand, and also just the idea. And this they're giving away. It's not like this is like secret stuff, right? And so they've got the whole thing here. One of the things that I actually loved about this, I'm going to actually read this paragraph. If they have it here in our introduction. And again, the whole thing's online. And this is great because it actually gets to kind of the idea of how we do stuff and how we learn things and how as human beings we expand our mind so we're capable of conceiving of, this entire universe, right? So we can somehow accurately model some of the vastness and the amazingness of life in our little brains. And one of the ways that we learn how to do that is this concept of critical thinking. Critical thinking, critical analysis, these kind of ideas are fundamental to higher education and the idea of learning how to think again, right? Because all humans, we're given that, we kind of have that ability to think, right, and logically process things. Basically, we have our instinct, and we call it instinct, and when we see it in other animals, we have the ability to do that. But to actually learn how to think is not a trivial process. And let me read this real quick. And critical thinking often involves defining words and giving and evaluating reasons, asking questions like, what do you mean? And why think that? It involves stating arguments in their full pattern of reasoning and rigorously evaluating all premises. It involves identifying differing explanations of various moral and scientific facts and trying to determine which explanations are best. It involves thinking about thinking. And this is the part 2, and it says, most importantly, good critical thinking isn't done with an agenda or just point of view. It's to find a point of view that's worth supporting. And I, just as a real quick understanding of where a lot of my political views, my stances, my understandings, all of this comes from, the idea is to work from a critical thinking standpoint, come up with the best answer that you can, always be open to new data that's going to refine that solution or that understanding or that model that you have that gives you the understanding. Always be open to having that ability to refine it, but also understand that after a certain point you have something that has passed the critical thinking test, that has defined terms, that has an understanding. And so when we talk about, and when I talk about this issue of abortion, I'm not only talking about it from this understanding these actual terms involved, and that's one of the things that this paper is great about, is it, says, no, well, this is what that term means, and this is what that term means, and people who say this term aren't having a serious, honest conversation, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. But that's one of the things that's great about this, being able to get into it. The difficult part, of course, is that so many people who are involved in this debate are not going to sit down and read really what's ultimately about a 50-page, pretty easy reading book about this. They're not going to spend that much time thinking about it. As you've seen now, a lot of the folks who are on this anti-abortion side have never actually really thought about what this stuff means. Now, to make that point even more clearly, I'm going to do a quick video here for you. So this is a guy, literally someone who's in the United States Congress. And I want you to understand here where we're going to have to go from here, where they're going to have to try and go from here. Right now in all these states where abortion is illegal, you have a very, very difficult situation that's only going to get worse. We've seen, and I'll talk about this specific little one case that people don't realize, that this 10-year-old case, before we get to this, I'm sorry, this case with this 10-year-old girl, this horrible situation where obviously she was raped, obviously there's, an abortion is the correct course of action by, 99% of human beings would decide that this is correct. But then they act like, this is going to be an isolated case. It's not. This stuff happens all the time. Or that there's some other way to deal with this other than what we're going to see here in some of these things. This case this last week, and I was going to wait a little bit to talk about it, but has really, really highlighted why this is going to be such a weird battle, so to speak, because on the one hand you have folks who are informed, understand what they're talking about, know that these kind of things happen all the time, know that argument that I just showed you, that in most cases most people would find most abortions are in fact the morally correct choice. And this is the hard part for a lot of folks to really understand. It's not really your place to make that moral decision for others, but also B, in most cases, folks would actually agree with the person who is making the choice to end their pregnancy. That's the thing that is so hard for these folks to understand. We'll see this here in this clip and some of these others. I want to show these mainly because the responses that I'm going to show you are wonderful. And I think people who are making these arguments that all these Republican, older male, one of these guys isn't that old, he's just very disingenuous, but the arguments that they're making are ones you're going to see again. And I'll talk a little later about what these arguments would justify, were they to be true. They're not, but we'll get to that.
You agree with Infanticide?
Well, I think you're using inflammatory language to basically describe a situation that does not happen. We don't have infanticide happening. Doctors would not do that, and neither would folks who have carried pregnancy.
Okay, would a healthy child...
I do want to reiterate here how dumb this argument is. And one of the things that we'll see over and over again in these is that, again, folks want to try to characterize everyone who gets an abortion as it being an elective thing and something of a convenience choice. And it's really important to understand how ridiculously offensive that is in almost every single case, in every case. And just to have that kind of conception as a core part of your argument that you will not step away from tells you how bullshit all of this Republican stuff is. Sorry.
Now, do you agree if a healthy child is born, that it's that woman's right to decide if it lives or dies?
What I think is, based on your question, you have a very low opinion of pregnant people. Because if you think
No,
anybody would
answer the question.
Excuse me.
Answer the question.
I'm answering it. Do you
No,
want
you're not.
You want
I
to
will
answer
take
it, or
it
you
that you
want to
agree.
keep talking over witnesses? What I'm
No, no.
telling you is, nobody would carry a pregnancy and then decide on a Monday because they are bored that they want to have an abortion. That's ridiculous. And it's inflammatory. What you're saying, you're talking about families who are in tough situations where folks have been excited about carrying a pregnancy. Most of the abortions that happen later in pregnancy are really tragedies where it's really a disappointment for everyone involved.
But you agree with it.
And this, again, is one of the things that folks who want to be willfully ignorant on this issue aren't going to understand. That in many of these cases, not only do they agree with the moral decision that has been made by the person who has decided to end a pregnancy, but they do the exact same thing. And they just don't like to think about these kind of things because, quite frankly, it's cruel to make people think about a lot of these situations in a certain sense because they are so difficult emotionally to deal with. And so it's not like, oh, here, let me describe this horrible situation for you. What would you do? Okay, here's 10,000 different scenarios, all slightly different, but with the same overarching theme. And then to take all of that and be like, well, that was a bunch of words.
I take it with all those words. You do agree with basically murdering a child after they're born.
So, and this is one of the things why reading that book is so worthwhile, because you realize that anybody who talks like this, right, anybody who uses the word murder in this context has no idea, A, what that word means, or B, what they're talking about, right? And it's a common theme to try and, use such an emotionally charged word like in a murder, the willful, malicious intent to end a life, right? To bring that into this context. And one of the things that's really, really wonderful about this book here again is that it addresses this directly, right? And let me see, I don't want to find, right? And here's where you have these defining words. And this is where saying, oh, it might have this definition or that definition. Again, I'm telling you, if you're interested in having this conversation over and over and over again, read this book. It will show you every single argument that you've seen, almost. I mean, it really covers conceptually the way that people try to frame their arguments. It's not a judgmental work. It's a work of critical thinking, of looking at the ideas, the concepts, the words, seeing if they actually apply to the situations, and then if they don't, saying they don't. This is what analytic philosophy, it's probably not what they call it, but this is a work of analysis by philosophers, whatever. I'm a realist and a pragmatist. Anyway, so to continue with this, silliness.
Miss Graves, could you answer that? Would you just, yes or no?
I have to say,
No.
Congressman, how you just characterize the representative statement is extremely inflammatory and the type of thing that is dangerous.
And what
You guys have been talking today about the threats against crisis pregnancy centers, which I assume are serious and are terrible. The threats
I've
that
got a
people
limited
who
amount of
work on
time.
abortion
I'm not letting you
access
reclaim my
every
time.
single day,
I'm assuming
and
that you're
part of
for
it is
infanticide.
because of this
I
sort
would
of
also say that
inflammatory
her life.
Did you catch that right there?
Because of this sort
I would
of
also say that
inflammatory-
I'm assuming
and
that you're
part of
for
it is
claiming my
every
time.
single day,
I'm assuming
and
that you're
part of
for
it is
infanticide.
because of this
I'm
sort of
claiming my
every
time.
single day,
I'm assuming
and
that you're
part of
for
it is
infanticide.
because of this sort-
I'm assuming you're for infanticide. How can one possibly honestly reach that conclusion from the discussion that just happened. And then I'll just...
I would also say that her language of health. Madam Chair, sorry, sir.
So that's crazy town, right? And so now let's talk about this a little bit too, because also, again, you have to realize that a lot of these Republicans are playing really dumb about this whole thing. There was another exchange that kind of gets at this. The, what is a woman? Idiot crowd is really stepping into this in very dishonest and disingenuous ways. I think it's important to note how they're playing dumb. They understand exactly what people are saying. They just don't want to actually agree with it. And this kind of bigotry is dangerous. We'll get to this here in a little bit, but let me go ahead and this actually straight up gets called out for the danger that it is right here.
Professor Bridges, you said several times, you've used a phrase, I want to make sure I understand what you mean by it. You've referred to people with a capacity for pregnancy. Would that be women?
Let me be clear about this in the context of our other thing. And this is one of the things that you need to remember about how utterly disingenuous these people here, including this person, Senator Hawley here. Meow, meow, meow. People with the capacity for pregnancy. It's a lot of words. The difficulty is that the human language doesn't really cover a lot of edge cases in this. And you're like, oh, well, it's just women who can get pregnant. Okay, so you're telling me that the 10-year-old girl there, she's a woman. And you're like, well, she had her period. She's a woman. A 10-year-old girl is not per se a woman in our culture. It's those 10-year-old girl, woman. I mean, it's you're having to say it's a 10-year-old girl, not a 10-year-old woman. So the notion here, this capacity for pregnancy, it's inclusive, kind language that everyone who can hear it can say, okay, that works. And it's not, the idea here isn't to offend someone like Hawley, who's going to just be offended about whatever the heck he wants to be offended about. There's no way not to offend someone who's that smart, who's decided to just be offended. So anyway, I just kind of wanted to address that whole thing because it's such horseshit, but she does a great job of smacking down him. So we're going to watch that.
Many women, cis women, have the capacity. Many women, cis.
By the way, did you catch that little stupid pause? That look at. Oh. Gosh, I really don't understand. Oh. Yeah, the stupid white guy face. Yeah, that's an act.
Many women, cis women, have the capacity for pregnancy. Many cis women do not have the capacity for pregnancy. There are also trans men who are capable of pregnancy, as well as non-binary people who are capable of pregnancy.
So this isn't really a women's...
So
We can recognize that this impacts women, and while also recognizing that it impacts other groups. Those things are not mutually exclusive, Senator Hawley.
Would you like me to draw you a Venn diagram? Because it's not that hard, and you're not that stupid, really, are you?
All right, so your view is that the core of this right then is about what?
So,
What is it? I don't get it. Is it like for women, or like are you? I don't know. Are you a woman? What is a woman? It's such an act, and it's such bullshit from these people.
I want to recognize that your line of questioning is transphobic.
It is.
And it opens up trans people to violence. By
It
not
does.
Recognizing that.
Wow, you're saying that I'm opening up people to violence by asking whether or not women are the folks...
Wow, is that like, if I like say like you're not really a person and you shouldn't exist, does that like mean that people want to kill you, might do it and think that they're good? Yeah, that's what it means.
Can have pregnancies?
So I want to note that 1 out of 5 transgender persons have attempted suicide. So I think it's important.
Because of my line of questioning? So we can't talk about?
Whoa, I can't even like ask these questions? Gosh, I mean, That seems like that's totally fascist, man. I can't even ask why. Even though, I'm not gonna, I've already, somebody's already answered me many, many times, and there's books that I can read, and I probably got taught in college exactly the answers to these questions, but I can just ask, can I?
Because denying that trans people exist and pretending not to know that they exist.
I'm
is
denying that trans
dangerous.
people
Pretending? Nailed it!
exist by asking
Are you?
you if you're
Are
talking
you?
about women
Are you?
getting pregnant.
Are
Do you
you?
believe
You gotta keep asking them, because they're just assholes.
that men can get pregnant?
No, I don't think women can
So
get
you're
pregnant.
denying that trans people exist?
And that leads to violence. Is this how you run your classroom? Are students allowed to?
Is this how you run your classroom? Like, not letting, like, white guys just ask disingenuous questions and then treating them as if they're really wise? You don't just let that bullshit fly? Whoa.
Question you, or are they
Absolutely.
also treated like this? Where
Oh,
they're
they're
told that
treated
they're
like
not opening up
this.
people to
Oh.
violence.
We have a
open
little
up
more
people
like
to
you should
violence.
I bet.
You might learn a lot.
Wow, I would learn a lot. I've learned a lot
I
just from this
know,
exchange.
absolutely.
Extraordinary.
Yep.
Miss,
It's great. Guy is such a douchebag. And if you, by the way, think that he came out of that looking like anything other than a douchebag, you're a douchebag. So, there's those. Now this, here's one of the things. Like, this is the Wall Street Journal editorial page, right? This isn't like nobody, that Tucker asshole. All of them went down on this thing so hard. An abortion story too good to confirm. Again, as I noted earlier, this kind of stuff happens all the time. It happens everywhere. And these people, we should just stop evil, and then we wouldn't have to have these people doing these horrible things with their bodies. And that's not what the human condition looks like. And all of the people who are claiming to be pro-life and all this, had they passed universal health care, had they passed even universal preschool, had they passed any kind of protection for children from guns, any kind of, there are 100 different things that would do so much more to bring about good life than forcing women to have birth. Forced birth fascism is horrible. It's what the anti-abortion movement is. And when this story comes out, they can't face the facts and the reality of it, so they just deny it exists. They just deny it exists. And I want you to understand here, and this is the thing we're going to talk about this next thing, not only that, but they're going to take this to another level on this. Another level. And this guy, there's 47 seconds of crazy town fascism, and this is what's coming.
So what's going on, Todd? Jesse, thanks for having me on, but I shouldn't be here, right? I mean, first of all,
Well, we not going to argue with you there.
this is an illegal immigration issue
No, it isn't. You're a douchebag.
because
By the way,
of
that's a white supremacist talking point, so just so you know what you're looking at.
Biden's lawlessness at the border and everything going on down there. That's why Indiana, as a non-border state, has actually filed several independent lawsuits on that. Then we have the rape, and then we have this abortion activist acting as a doctor with a history of failing to report. So we're gathering the information, we're gathering the evidence as we speak.
I want you to understand something here. Failure to report. The idea here is that because there was not a crime reported, the doctor is in trouble. So in a lot of these cases, and a lot of the other more, quote, traditional rape cases and date rape cases that you're going to see in droves in all these forced birth states once everyone goes back to college, they're going to ask for police reports in order to allow any kind of exception to the laws for an abortion. So there's going to be a whole lot more discussion about these kind of things, and then also trying to go after abortion doctors for not, oh, you knew a rape occurred, but you didn't report it? Well, I can understand why the woman wouldn't. Ha ha ha. Why didn't you, doctor? There's going to be so much more of this. It's going to get very bad. But they're going after doctors.
And we're going to fight this to the end, including looking at her licensure if she failed to report.
Now again, Fox is a news station that I'm going to take that off of there because that's, I don't want to have that on there any more than I need to. They're targeting this doctor who helped this little girl who had to go to a different state because the state she lived in wouldn't let her get an abortion because she was raped. Again, folks, this is within a month, and 2 weeks of this month you've had half of our political world denying this even happened. Now just wait. It's going to get crazier because let me show you what else these folks are thinking. This next one is absolutely mind-blowing. Unless you understand what they think these words mean. You have to understand, they think an abortion is something bad people do. They think it's something that's akin to murder. Good people in their mind don't get abortions. There's no good reason for an abortion in their mind. So, with that understanding, again, that's complete bullshit, it's batshit crazy, but that's what we're dealing with. If you understand that's what they think, this makes more sense, but still, of course, no sense. Oh no. Thought I had it queued up, but I did not. Alright, let's refresh it. Alright. Swalwell. Swole. Alright.
Would a 10-year-old choose to carry a baby?
In the Ohio case, the Ohio Attorney General said that abortion would have been justified.
Focus on the question, please. Would a 10-year-old choose to carry a baby?
I cannot.
Do you think a 10-year-old should choose to carry a baby?
He asks some good questions here to really get at this.
I believe it would probably impact her life, and so therefore it would fall under any exception and would not be an abortion.
What? So here again, this idea that if it falls under an exception, it's not an abortion, is complete and utter bullshit. The notion that, oh, an abortion, so again, they're saying an abortion, which again, I know I keep saying the word and hopefully you're comfortable with it now, it's a medical terminology for ending a pregnancy. But in the minds of the anti-abortion people, again, they're anti-abortion, but they never could even say the word because they had to lie about what it is. In their mind, an abortion is a murder. It's an evil act. It can never be good or decent. So they can't conceive of the idea that they are justified, which in this case, again, nearly every single sentient human being, and certainly any adult, and certainly any man with a daughter. No, and I can't say any, because again, there's such edge cases for human understanding of our own experience, but almost everyone would agree, no question, end this pregnancy now as quickly as possible. But what they're saying is that, no, this doesn't even count. It's mind-blowing. Now follow the rest of this. I'll see if I can do it without interrupting.
Wait. It would not be an abortion if a 10-year-old with her parents made the decision not to have a baby that was the result of a rape?
If a 10-year-old became pregnant as a result of rape and it was threatening her life, then that's not an abortion. So it would not fall under any abortion restriction in our nation.
So that is completely false. It's completely false. She's lying. And again, you need to understand, this is the person who runs these things. This is not a nobody. And she has no freaking clue what she's even talking about. None.
Ms. Warbelow, are you familiar with disinformation?
Yes, I am.
Did you just hear some disinformation?
Yes, I heard some very significant disinformation.
Why don't you tell me about that?
Yes, an abortion is a procedure. It's a medical procedure that individuals undergo for a wide range of circumstances, including because they have been sexually assaulted, raped in the case of the 10-year-old. It doesn't matter whether or not there's statutory exemption. It is still a medical procedure that is understood to be an abortion.
So, yesterday, Ms. Warbelow, speaking of disinformation, Jim Jordan called a 10-year-old rape victim a liar. A 10-year-old rape victim was called a liar by the ranking member of this committee. And I know that he did that because he hates the president. It's clear every day from his statements and the statements from MAGA Republicans that they don't like Joe Biden, so they're going to call him a liar. That's fine. But what is worse is the reason that he did it is because he doesn't like what that rape victim represents, which is that this law from the Supreme Court, Dobbs, and the laws that will follow in states like Ohio, in Texas, in Georgia, and other states will bring us government-mandated pregnancies for 10-year-olds, fourth graders, little girls. And to deflect from that, they choose to bully and beat up transgender individuals who represent fewer than 1% of Americans. And they try and deflect that because they don't want anyone in America to realize that they don't just want to wage a war on women, they're now expanding it to a war on little girls.
Yeah. And so that's what we're dealing with here. And I can't. So what's going to come next, right? So you have this situation in these states where, in their minds, they're going after murder. So what they're going to do is, would you let somebody cross state lines to commit a murder? Of course not. So you're not going to let the state travel. The state of Texas is already suing against the federal government. Biden came out and said, well, Medicaid and Medicare, if you provide those services and somebody needs life-saving medical services, you need to provide them regardless of what state law is. Texas turned around and said, nope, we're going to sue to make those women die because we want those women to die. And that just happened 4 hours ago. Texas sues to block federal government to block federal guidance on abortions to save mothers' lives. I mean, this just happened 4 hours ago. So the question of, what Republicans are going to do, are they going to escalate or back down? They're not going to back down. They're going to escalate constantly. Information sharing, they're going to go after all that kind of stuff. The Texas bounty law, remember, so now you have this situation where abortions are outlawed in your state. Somebody gets pregnant later, they're not pregnant anymore. Where's the baby? There's a bounty, $10,000 if you can figure out that it was an abortion and you can catch them. This is a dystopian society that exists right now. So this show that I'm doing and what I'm, in my basement here this afternoon doing, we need to get out of this. We need to escape this dystopia. People need to know what it is. You can't even give advice. You can't tell people where or how to get an abortion without becoming a felon in this other state. All of this comes from this notion and understanding that this act, this medical procedure, carries the moral weight of murder. And conceptually, that idea is dealt with extremely well in that book. It is, of course, not close to that. All right. Let's talk the insurrection. So we know now, right? Donald lost. He didn't want to leave. Got a bunch of state legislatures to put together fake slates of electors. Tried to pressure the vice president to reject the ones that were submitted legally, conspired with a number of congressmen and senators around the country to overturn our election. During the riot, he attempted to get armed insurrectionists closer to the Capitol so that when they stormed the Capitol, they would still have all their weapons, taking away the magnetometers outside that were looking for weapons. Then attempted to physically control his car to lead them. Apparently, during the riots in the Capitol, the rioters were 40 feet from the vice president, and without the vice president, technically, you couldn't really move on and seat the next presidential candidate. So 40 feet, our democracy was 40 feet from the mob, really ultimately causing maybe not permanent, but a great deal of damage. The difficult part that we face now is how do you deal with these people, right? It's the erosion in faith in the system when people are able to do this and not face consequences is massive. And history teaches very clearly that anyone who attempts this attempts what is considered to be, and everyone's in their own mind, it's an insurrection. This is treason. These are things literally in the Constitution that calls for the death penalty. I spent some time in Boston this last week for a great reunion with my family and some siblings. Had a great time, but just seeped in that American history and culture, and how many people fought for these ideas that we had over the years, and as we've refined the concepts of freedom over the many, many years that we've existed. To see this kind of stuff and what they wanted to do to overthrow our democracy, you see the fragility of it, you see the sense of it, you also see that they're going to try again. This mass movement of this MAGA stuff, there's a great book on it, I share it all the time. It's just on the nature of mass movements. They're going to move from the inspiration stage, which was Donald, into the action stage, where you take all these crazy ideas that he had and ridiculous stuff and make them real everywhere. You saw that attorney general. That was an attorney general for a state in the United States, blaming, every rape on an immigrant. We've seen what this happens in history when you pick marginalized minorities and blame everything on them. Who gets away with things? What happens to justice? How quickly you devolve into this horrible dystopian nightmare. So it's important that these people be held as accountable as soon as possible. Of course, electorally, don't vote for Republicans, obviously. I mean, this has been clear for a long time that any vote for any Republican in any race and anywhere in the country ultimately feeds more power into the political machine that created this problem. If you want to say, well, but both sides, I did a whole video about that before. You can go watch that. I'm not going to waste fucking time with you right now. So, anyway, that's what we're facing. That's it's here, right? This full-on idea that, they're going to just start making up lies. You believe in infanticide, and then start being, well, infanticide people can't have them on the street. Rock them up. You have people going after books, banning books already across all sorts of places. I'm not going to tell you too much about it, but I've got it's bad out there, I think, from that sense. Yeah. So, I'm going to try and end on a good note, because I do like to be positive and optimistic about reality and our place in it. So, and this is kind of a weird place for me. I talk about this sometimes every now and again. I'll finish on this. This is my Spaceship Earth thing. Again, I'm a pantheist, right? So I have this interesting conception about how energy, life, God, everything works all together. You see these kind of things from that kind of perspective, and then you see these big I'm getting hot, so I'm gonna have to stop soon. Right? I mean, and again, you're talking about this. I have a concept that I write about in the book about Big E, right? Like all this energy and motion in the universe that's all constantly changing from one thing to another. This our birthplace in the stars, and this concept of life and where life on our planet came from. I'm a big believer in. Well, I guess big believer. The most plausible theory that I think is out there is kind of this panspermia theory, that there's, these building blocks and proto-life all over the place, right? And it's actually somewhat common in the sense that, if you have a place that can support it, then it's probably going to be there. We've seen, life that is capable of at least some form of interstellar travel and existence. These structures and forms that will hold throughout time and space, therefore just kind of going everywhere until they land someplace, and then they build all sorts of crazy life, which then, again, panspermia, it's everywhere. So, and this is why people who are big into this kind of stuff love water bears, because they kind of exhibit a lot of the processes of what would be kind of a proto-life that could be there. There's also a thing I remember reading a little bit about, I'd have to see it again, but basically looking at the evolutionary structure in our current state, right, and the speed at which normal evolutionary processes happen, there hasn't generally been enough time stably on this planet for all the evolutionary changes that we've seen occur, right, from single cell life all the way to what we are. Like, and if you instead of starting from single cell life and going all the way to what we are, right, if you start with like water bears, right, you're a long way closer than you were. So the notion that life had to start here is, to me, nonsensical. I don't think it had to start even here. It could have started anywhere in the universe as long as this stuff gets all passed around. Long story short, I think there's other life on other planets. Just as there's lots of other life here on our planet. I think our ability to communicate with other life is as clear as it is what we can now. I think if we really want to try and figure out what we need to be doing is learning how to talk to squids. And I know that's just it's like almost a big joke. Cephalopods, octopuses, things like that. Because I think that kind of form seems not unlikely, right? Given water. And so if we want to learn how to talk to alien life or other aliens, I think we need to start talking to the ones that we have here on our planet. And this is where I think like machine learning language models could be really, really cool and effective. I'd love to see, I've been doing some stuff lately with some AI generative art and seeing some stuff, and I did the bit on the last couple shows. But the power of these models to, because communication is kind of a basic kind of input-output model. It really works well for these kind of things, which, why our neural nets are so great at it. But I'd love to see it focused on learning how to, talk to squids. I'd love to. Tell you what, I gotta start some company or something and send rockets up in the air so I can get $1 billion, and then I can have a company that learns how to talk to squids. So that would be cool. Anyway, that's my fun little thing for the day. I got my sheen going, so we're gonna go ahead and call it. If you made it all the way through the show, I appreciate it. I think it's important for us to understand what's going to happen, the difficulties of that, the complexities of this issue. I'll share this link here in the story, so if anybody finds this later, it'll be in the description. And with that, I think we're going to end this. How long did we go for? I don't even know. I need way better metrics on this thing, but I think it works. Hopefully. If not, I'm just talking into the void once more. Alright, peace out. Until next time, y'all. Have a good one.